Hello, my name is Dominic Finello, and this is my book report for environmental science class for the spring 2022 semester. And in my report, I read the book Resurrection Science by M.R. O'Connor. Um, and just some quick things about M.R. O'Connor that I think are important to note. Um, she is a journalist who writes about the politics and the ethics of science, more specifically technology and the conservation. Um, this it is important to note. I believe that this is her first book. This is her first project, the first book she has written. Um, and with that being said, let's get into it. This book focuses the main topic on keeping animals from going extinct um, and the ethics behind that and strategies to keep animals from going extinct. Um, for example, in the first chapter of the book, we take a trip to Tanzania where where there are not a lot of there's not a lot of electricity in Tanzania. Not a lot of people have access to this electricity in Tanzania. So they need to build up this new power generator um, so that more Tanzanians can have this electricity. Um, but what happens here is this journalist, M.R. O'Connor, goes out with another group of scientists um, and they find a new species of toad that is living in the direct area that they are planning to build this piece of machinery. So the chapter deals with them trying to figure out different ways they can save this species of toad because, as far as they know, this is the only place that they exist in, and that's a reoccurring thing throughout the book is finding ways to keep species from going extinct, uh, whether it be relocating species or bringing them into a controlled environment. The book does spend a portion of the time talking about controlled environments, and I think it's important to note that the book does tell us that brings up the point that when you're in a controlled environment and you're raising up a species in a controlled environment, it's difficult for that species then to go back out into nature and thrive the same way that they did when they were in that controlled environment. Another main point that the author makes is this idea of playing God and the human race playing God in nature, so to speak, as in being the deciding factor and us deciding, what goes where, um, and how to go about things in nature. And are we as the human race, is that our responsibility or do we have that power to make those decisions? Um, and the main topic of just overall nature conservation. Um, but I think one of the biggest things, and I think that one of the biggest purposes, if I had to pick a main purpose for this book, it would be the purpose of what is a species worth. Um, Once you know it's very hard to determine what a species is worth. Um, but if you are able to determine what a species is worth, you are then able to determine what you can do and how much money and technology and time you can put into saving that certain species. And then if I could pick one sentence out of this entire book that I think sums it up perfectly, that main point of what is a species worth, I like to go to your chapter Freezing Crows in page 141. The quote reads, "Preservation of every scrap of biodiversity is an ethical imperative until humanity understands its value." I think that just perfectly encapsulates that idea of knowing what a species is worth. And a point I'd like to kind of go back to, just because I kind of glossed over it, is back to the controlled environment. A quote I'd like to pull from the book from there is from the first chapter in Ark of the Toads from page 25. The author says, "How far should scientists go to prevent the extinction from species?" And then I think the key one here is, can a species ever be wild again after we save it? Which, in my mind just goes back, or is just more evidence that it's hard for a species to go back to be thriving the way it was after being in a controlled environment for so long. It's nearly impossible for a species to go back to that. Another big thing about the book is the idea of bringing extinct species back. And they're not talking about bringing the dinosaurs or anything like that back. But animals that go extinct more recently. And in my opinion, one of the better chapters of the book, O'Connor visits a frozen zoo, so to speak, which is inside an American Museum of Natural History in New York City. And the facility itself houses more than 100,000 biological samples kept frozen at negative 160 degrees Celsius using liquid nitrogen. So they're preserving these pieces of DNA. They're preserving these things. And so now the question that science is looking at is, are we able to use those to bring back species, like cloning, using them to clone them, to bring back these extinct species? But then we go back to that quote in page 25, once a species is saved, can it actually ever be wild again? And that's the main purpose of the book, is going back and forth between those topics. And then just some things about how the book is written. I like the book because it gets your mind thinking. It's a good book to get the gears moving. It makes you question how you think about things, and it makes you question why we do things a certain way. Because I personally, I'm an animal person, and I want to save as many animals as I can. And this book helps me just to think about that more. What more can I do to help save different kinds of species? A couple criticisms with the book. Really, my only criticism is the book is slow at times. I'm not a huge nonfiction type of person, and I don't read a lot of nonfiction type books because of the reason that I find them slightly or a little bit slow. And I think this book is a little slow. But once you get past how slow it is, the author does a good job of steering clear of super technical descriptions, and uses a language that you can understand, that is easy for everybody to understand. And I think, just to wrap everything up, I did like the book. I enjoyed reading it. I would recommend the book to those interested in the science of extinction and preservation of species going extinct, and even bringing those species back. However, I would not recommend the book for people that are looking for a fun read. Although there are fun parts in it, it's not your get up, get at 'em, read 'em book, in my opinion. But with that being said, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to view my book review, and I hope if you get the chance to read this book that you take up on that opportunity. Thank you.